Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome to the F1 starting grid. We're excited to be back with you with the three of us all together. Um,
Yes.
we've got a lot to talk about.
Oh
So
my
I'm
goodness,
I'm
yes.
Barry here with Chad and Micah, and it's been a fun week. It was a great race weekend last week, and we've got another race this coming weekend. So no more of these long breaks in between. Guys, how you doing? How you feeling about everything happening in the F1 world?
Well, it's great to have Micah back. I think that's the biggest buzz around here. We certainly we joked, not joke, it was actually serious, but there's a few times where like I bet Micah would know that. We were like mentioning
Yeah,
something, or
yeah.
like I don't know if it was about like what tires could you use or something
Yeah,
in the new sprint or something, and we're like Micah would know that. So it was a bummer to have you. We missed you, but
Thank you.
yeah, I think just I think the hiatus is gone. The desert. We had the oasis that we could come to Baku. It took so long to get to there. It seems like we're back in it, and I think it was just so good to be back into a really fantastic weekend of racing. Yeah, in some ways from a long out, not having races, I should say. So
for sure, for sure. Yeah, there's been so many comments post Baku, post the race, how boring the race was. Of course, Toto Wolff is kind of weighing in on that. I I think there's so much for us to talk about. I don't
so
see
much,
really anything boring about the race.
yeah,
If it was boring in regard to passing or lack of accidents, okay, I'll give you that. But I think the action on track in Baku was absolutely spectacular. Some great results, of course. Sergio Perez taking the win both days, and so good stuff. Good racing.
I think of
Yeah,
all the races though in the season, Baku is probably one of my top three because it always seems to perform. This year, I don't think it lived up to what I know Baku to be. And I think that was the thing where maybe that like the
yeah,
little cherry on top. And yeah, like maybe the race was still eventful. We still got some stuff, thankfully, because Nick DeVries clipped a corner and we got a safety car. Like but normally Baku, like we're able to get incredible overtakes. And I mean, think back to Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen hitting each other. Think back to Max and his tire bursting as he's going down the straight, And
oh
so I
yeah,
think I think when I think of Baku, I think of all of these key pivotal Formula One moments,
right.
especially within their respective year. And this year, I feel like it was kind of a stinker compared to other Bakus.
Sure, sure.
And really, it's all about learnings. We are learning about these cars. We're learning about these new regulations. We're seeing how these cars interact on these racetracks that we've never seen them before. One team has managed to figure out how to be fast, and
Right,
that team finished 20 seconds ahead
right,
of Ferrari, and
right.
Red Bull seems to just be like, okay, well, like we're good. Everybody else, you can figure your stuff out.
Yeah,
We're good, and they're more than double the points in constructors championships. They have 180 points, and
right.
Aston Martin has 87, so they're more than
Well,
double
and
the next team.
but here's the thing going into the weekend, and we talked about this on the last episode, um, was what were the changes that were made to the cars coming into this
Mhm.
weekend?
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
kind of changes are we going to see from people? Is there going to
Yeah.
be a big difference? And then we see Ferrari on pole position with Leclerc and
Absolutely.
thinking,
Absolutely.
okay, we're going to have a competitive race. And then when it came to actual race time, that what was
Yeah.
happening in quali was not then replicated out on the track.
Right.
And yeah, what are your
yeah.
thoughts, Chad?
Well, I was reading earlier. It's just I think we always have this like to your point, Micah, like this idea of Baku, and I
Right.
think somebody wrote like even calling it like the Baku syndrome of like
Yeah.
we expect stuff to happen, right? It's
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
with it being tight corners,
Right.
in fast sections, something's going to happen. Is typically so. I kind of was looking. I just thinking about this even just now, but we're teams playing it more conservative in the hopes that somebody
Hmm.
else would make that mistake and they wouldn't, and that maybe why we didn't get as much action. Were more teams being a little more conservative.
Right.
I don't know, or was it just fate? That just it's just the whatever happened.
Yeah.
But it seems
What
like maybe there was some more conservativeness so that
Mhm.
there wasn't as many, touching the walls or getting into contact, so people could maybe sneak by and make up some spots.
Well, I think one thing is that it definitely factors into their strategy that there's an
Sure.
assumption that there'll be multiple safety cars, not just one,
Right.
but multiple safety cars.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
teams are factoring in their pit stop strategy
Mhm.
because they're just constantly going, well, let's just keep going because there's probably going to be a safety car. And then, feel bad for Lewis Hamilton because he does end up pitting. And then right after it, there is that safety car.
Yeah.
But usually there's multiple
Right.
incidents on that
Absolutely.
track.
Yeah.
So to have a relatively incident-free race, because that safety car and Nick de Vries hitting that wall came pretty early on in the race, and then after that, it was just, it was the Red Bulls way up front, Ferrari
Right.
and Aston Martin just kind of duking it out behind that, and then just one long DRS train from there
Yeah.
on out, right? And
Behind
no one able to
Ocon
be out of it.
and Hulkenberg. Yeah.
Which there was a little drama at the end. I mean, at least we got the Ocon coming into the pit. I don't want to jump to the end yet, but coming
that
into the
is
pit,
not
Well, we
the
can talk
drama
about
I
it.
want from Baku.
I mean,
though. That is not
yeah,
what I want.
totally. I'm being funny. If you guys didn't watch the race or didn't see the last lap, Ocon actually had, you have to have two sets of tires, use two different compounds of tires for each race, and he had gone long on a set of hards, hoping for
For
a
50
safety
laps, the
car
whole
or
race,
something
pretty much,
to something so he could change tires. That didn't happen. So as a result, he was forced to come into the pits the last lap. Well, typically the pit straight closes down and they have photographers there and they do the whole fanfare. Park Ferme, yes. And so as he coming through, there was photographers and they're starting to put out the boards and right where the cars drive. I mean, what is it, 60 miles an hour there or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, he almost hit some people, and there was a lot of people getting mad at him for maybe not stopping. But it was crazy, and it shouldn't have happened.
I think it's well within his right to do everything he needs to do as a driver.
Well,
and that's a Formula One thing. That's an FIA thing. That's
right.
Like people didn't need to be there anyway. And here's, I'm not going to put it against the photographer because I follow photographers on social media and they don't follow the race. They're there to take photos. They're not following who hasn't pit or not. But you would think somebody would think Esteban Ocon hasn't pit yet. We should probably not get on the pit lane yet because they haven't pit yet.
It's an active racetrack. That's the thing.
Right.
Until the race is over, the race isn't over. And that's fully on the FIA to, the fact that they allow that to happen.
Right.
Because that's, you look back in the history of Formula One and in those times where people have been on the track, people have been, in pit lane, have been hit. It's disastrous. It is absolutely, it's just one person getting injured or killed. But in that scenario, if they hadn't gotten out of the way,
20, 30 people there. It was crazy.
Right. Yeah, no, it was unfortunate to see that. So I think this is just gonna, as we've already talked about FIA and some of the needs there. I think it's just gonna be a constant for us. Well, let's talk about the sprint format. We chatted about it last week a little bit, and we were thinking, is this going to be beneficial? Is it going to be good for the racing? It does add another spectacle to watch. But now that we've had the weekend, we've had this revised sprint format. What do you guys think?
I'm kind of like, I don't know yet. I think I'd need to see it again. I really enjoyed having 3 days full of events. Right. I really like 4 different events versus having, even on a sprint, having 3. Like, I really enjoyed having more content to watch as a Formula One fan.
Right.
I think what was hard was where last year I actually enjoyed how drivers drove in a sprint determined the way they entered in the race.
Right.
And so they needed to keep that into consideration. Where now, because it's like a sprint event and it exists in a silo, isolated from the rest of the weekend, I don't know if I see it as like a beneficial. I think I liked last year's better because at least last year's they got another practice, because like Leclerc complained about, they're not getting another practice, and their qualifying and the sprint is nowhere near long enough to even have actionable data being drawn from it. So
Right.
I do wonder as well if that also played into the fact that Baku wasn't as eventful, because
Yeah.
they just didn't get enough time driving on this track this year.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the case, maybe not. You can't say, you don't
But
know.
we heard that it wasn't just Leclerc. I think there was multiple
Right.
drivers who expressed that, and I'm with you in that it adds another event. Two qualifyings is great.
Mhm.
Having two qualies, two races. What's not to love about that?
Right.
And for the drivers for the championship, I mean, those points matter. You figure you get to the end of the season, and if you're separated by just a couple of points, these sprint races are going to factor into that pretty heavily. But yeah, Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in our pre-race. I think my biggest just critique in some ways is like, change it if you will, but why are we doing things mid-season?
Right.
And are we trying to fix problems that aren't there? I get commercial rights people, and they want to get more action, and I did enjoy being able to watch something a little more substantial. I mean, honestly, I throw on qualifying and practice. I record it and I'll listen to it while I'm like mowing the lawn or something. I mean, I kind of just absorb any racing, so to have a little bit more competition was fun. I'm not going to lie, but you can't help but think, yeah, did that impact the nature of the race? Was it more subdued because of that? I mean, just the fatigue on the drivers is going to be more there because they're stressed, they're worried, it's all unknown.
Yeah, for sure.
Long-term impacts on them and the teams. And are there going to be more subduedness because if you're going to have a race where there's points on the line, cars are going to probably get more impacted or could have more crashes. And so again, are we going to see more things like that? So I think it was fun. I think it was, okay, let's try it. But I didn't walk away with like, I want to do that forever, but
right.
I'm
kind of
so ever agree, but I would really be interested to see a reverse grade qualifying sprint. So you just take whatever the qualifying was on Friday, reverse the grid, do the sprint, reverse the first 10, just like F2 does.
Right.
And just do that for. I know they're not going to do that. Their teams
Right.
are not.
They're not.
That,
no, they would lose
but,
their ever-loving minds. It would.
Yeah.
It would be. I think it wouldn't. It would not go over well.
But that's the racing that the fans want. That's the
but here's
close
the thing.
action that we want.
But here's the thing: if it's a decision that's been made by the FIA midstream to try and bolster viewership, like we are already there. F1 is the fastest growing sport globally.
Right.
It's not like we're lacking for fans. I was just watching. If you guys listening, watching, if you want to get some great F1 content, photographer named Kim Illman from Australia. So shout out to Kim. We'll link down in the comments because it's got great content.
Friend of the pod.
Brenda, yeah. We'd love to meet you, Kim. He just did a podcast on popularity of the sport in the U.S. and it has more than doubled in the U.S. COTA in just like 4 years went from 220,000 spectators to 440,000. All three races are selling out. And here's a fun fact that one F1 race in the U.S. has more viewers than the Super Bowl. And you think about how big the Super Bowl is, and now there's 3 races. So all that to say, if the FIA is making decisions based on trying to get more people to watch, well, we're already there. So it's not good justification to make that big of a change. So I'm with you, Chad. As much as I'm not. If they keep doing it, I'll keep watching.
Right.
But I think the drivers' concerns are valid. Having that lack of those additional practices is exhausting. It might even be dangerous. But 2 qualies, 2 races. Yes, it's fun for the fans, but it takes a toll on the drivers for sure. So I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. So let's talk about the race. So we already mentioned Red Bull. Holy cow! They're just on fire.
So do you guys feel like Perez is actually up for the fight?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think I think Verstappen knows it, and he
Mhm.
is. I think there's just some chinks, some cracks in the armor. Like his emotions are coming out a little bit more, and I think it all has to do with the fact that he feels threatened.
So if Max, I heard an analogy the other day. If Max and him were to be 50 points apart and there's 2 races left, and Max DNFs the last 2 races, it's given to Checo.
It's
So like
right.
that's where I think he's seeing the long game. And he knows that because he's won 2 championships now. He's seeing the long game. Every single point has to matter as much as the last points. So you have to take everything. And not to be his caveat, because I don't think his actions were warranted, but I think that's maybe in the back of his mind when it was why he was so mad at Russell for the sprint
Right.
is because of that. And so I think Perez is there. Let's say Perez gets every single street course because he's the king of the streets. We know that. The first person to win 2 races at Baku. No one's ever won twice at Baku. We know that he's there. We know that he's capable of these things. We know that he's fast. I mean, I just, the only way I see Max going and just taking it is running away with Zandvoort, running away with, you know, uh, those races where we know Max is really good. I think that's the only thing where I see him coming in. And I think honestly, each driver is hoping that the other driver has a mechanical issue or crashes
For
out.
sure.
I think they're hoping that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, Barry, what do you think?
Well, I mean, this is from the beginning of this season, our very first
Right.
episode. This was the
Right.
conversation, and I think from my perspective, I thought if we're going to see intense action on the track this year, it's going to be Verstappen and Perez,
Right.
and it's just gearing up to be a fight. And it looks like Christian Horner at the end of the day is just going to let his drivers
No.
race
Do their thing.
because the thing is they're going to win the constructors championship no
Right.
matter what, and it doesn't. I think it'll be almost better for the team and better for the sport if Checo wins. I think just
Yeah.
because it adds more interest, right? You're gonna see a lot more Mexican fans jumping on board. It's I think though, there's the character side of the drivers, and we
Mhm.
see like
Mhm.
some of the behaviors. One of the challenges I've had with Lewis Hamilton is that when things don't go his way, he whines a lot, and there's a lot of blaming. And now I'm starting to see the same stuff with Verstappen, and I'm just like, and you see a driver like Fernando Alonso this weekend, who's out there racing, and as he's racing, he's telling his team how to coach Stroll on like, hey, like he's like all for his teammate, and
But do you think he really is?
I don't think Fernando Alonso is a good example because we're
No.
talking about present day Fernando
Okay.
Alonso.
Yes.
True.
Not.
True. Okay.
He is
I
playing
stand
up the crowd, man. He is
plenty.
Because
If
I
there's
hear him say
anybody.
like when Lance said, "I'm not going to pass you," like, "Hey,
Right.
Fernando's in front," and he's like, "He can make a charge. He can try." Like, let him.
We
get
don't
on.
know if he
this
was
is
baiting
all-
or not. We don't
This
know.
is all a part of Fernando's strategy
master
strategy
plan.
to win Taylor Swift. No,
Yeah, no, it is.
All I'm saying is I think Fernando's been around the sport a long time, and I get
Mhm.
that he's not
Mhm.
like he's not the stand-up guy. I mean, he's had his moments of lots of moments where he hasn't shined. But I also think you see some of the maturity. Sebastian Vettel was this way. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, he's like, I'm not gonna be a jerk about this. Like, yeah, and there's times where you get fired up, and it's an adrenaline-driven sport.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's when you see some of the complaining, the whining, and I think Verstappen was totally unjustified in the way that he not only complained about Russell, but the way he confronted him in the pit lane. I was just like, that's just low.
It was
And
very
Mhm.
classless.
Mhm.
Very classless.
this, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, come on, dude. Like, bring it up a notch. So I think if anything, the racing's gonna be good. What I'm really watching is what that's gonna look like off the track between the
Right.
two of them.
Right.
And we saw that with Lewis Nico Rosberg back in the day, where they
Mhm,
went from
mhm.
being besties to
Mhm.
to enemies because of that rivalry. And so it'll definitely put a damper on the team. I think it'll test Horner in that regard, but I think it's just going to make for great racing. If nothing else, if no one else is challenging them, yeah,
The challenge.
Verstappen and
Do you
Perez,
think?
yeah.
Do you think then that Max would have had a better chance of beating or passing or even getting to Checo
No.
if there was no safety car? Because he pit right before he pit under a yellow flag and Checo pit under a safety car. So like he could have, that's time that could have been eaten up, maybe.
I don't think he would have. I think I
Okay.
think, it was Red Bull obviously trying to stay away from some contact, especially
Right.
after Max had just, been a little feisty. But no, I don't think he would have. And I think Checo was I mean, he had everything to counter what Max was doing, in my opinion.
Right.
Um,
Right.
he is a fantastic driver. So, but on the day, he kept saying the setup on his front end wasn't right. I don't know if that was just an excuse for not doing good that weekend and Checo being better, but he just didn't feel like he was at one with the car. So
Right.
I don't think he would have, but I think just Red Bull was just like, hey, let's just get this out of the equation so we don't have to worry about some
Right.
contact or some other driver beef that is already brewing. Let's just stay away from that and pit him, and we'll have two different strategies.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think one, it's wisdom for the teams to do that. If you
Right.
two drivers on the track, don't put them, all your eggs in the same basket kind of deal. And that's just the way that racing goes. And then the drivers know that. It's just, I think the thing is that most of the teams have their lead driver, and then the driver who's kind of playing second fiddle, and the driver who just has more points or is just producing more gets to kind of have the pick of the strategy. So that creates a bit of a wrinkle for Red Bull, is like,
Right.
or Perez gets to pick on street courses and on road courses, and I don't know how they're going to play that out, but
Right.
for me, it doesn't matter, because I think it's just going to make for great racing, especially when we get to the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm all here for it. Yeah.
Speaking
The
on the rest
the
of the grid.
fireworks will not just be at the end of the race. Just
Oh,
put
no.
it that way.
Oh no. Speaking on the rest of the grid, you guys think Nick has a future in Formula One? Nick DeVries?
Not if he keeps going the way he's going. Yeah, you can't just drive into the wall. Like,
Right.
it's one thing for the back end to break out for me on a track like Baku, and have the tank slapper, I think they
Right.
call it, or but to run into the wall, your front tire, like, it wasn't even like being challenged.
Mhm,
He just ran into the wall.
It reminded me of old Mazepin.
Oh, good old Mazepin. Yeah.
Oh, I would never compare anyone to Mazepin.
But that's self-inflicted.
Yes, that kind of a
Self-inflicted for
driving
sure.
off the track right there.
That we did
He's
see.
a better
we did
driver
see-
than Mazepin. I'll clarify that.
We did see
Yeah.
Lance clip the same corner, just not as hard. We did see Lance clip the same corner on his
Sure.
left tire, and I believe he was double checking to see if there was if there's any track in which a driver is going to clip a corner.
Yeah.
It's Baku. Like,
Right.
Baku is some of the tightest.
Well,
has the tightest corner.
Monaco might have the
Monaco,
honors for
but
that.
Baku has the tightest corner in
Right,
all of
it's
Formula
true.
One.
Narrowest.
So
Yeah.
narrowest, sorry.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's comes into play, but also he's already 28, almost 30 years old.
Well,
He's
I mean, I don't think that's as much the factor is. So here's the thing.
more of do you think he has a future? Like, usually
Well-
they start so young. He's already so old.
Well, there's a great photo online of De Vries with, I think it's Stroll, Albon, and Leclerc, the four of them when they were karting. And and he was the oldest of that group. The thing with De Vries, and we were talking about this before we even started recording, was the fact that he's an F2 champion. He's an Formula E champion.
Mhm.
Like, the guy has like on paper,
he's got
he's a
pedigree, for sure.
phenomenal driver. But I think that just highlights how next level Formula One is. That winning in F2, winning in Formula E doesn't translate to being at the top of the the pecking order in Formula One. I think like Schumacher, before him, there's gonna be a grace for a season where it's like, okay, you're making some mistakes. Because remember, we're 4 races into the season.
Yeah.
Right. So let's see how this works out over the next. But if this continues for him, his team's not going to be on board with.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're at Haas, if you're at Williams, maybe that's a conversation. But like, you're at AlphaTauri, which they didn't do great last year. They're not doing so great this year. I get it, but I mean, I just don't expect we already know he scored points last year with Williams when he was a sit-in driver.
Right.
So I don't know. I think maybe my like Logan Sargent and Nick DeVries are the only 2 drivers this year that have not scored points yet, which I think is awesome, because not that there's only 2 drivers, that there's 18 drivers that have scored points. I think that's great for as much of a weighted to one side the grid is. It's really cool to see that. Every team has scored some form of points. This isn't like 2 years ago when, Haas and Williams were fighting for 1 point and they could barely get anything. So that's cool to see. However, my expectation, or rather, like Logan Sargent not scoring a point yet, is like, okay, all right, I'm not that worried about it. I think it's just interesting to see, especially someone who's come from Mercedes, who is a reserve driver at Mercedes, who has been in Formula One, in the grid, not like necessarily driving all the time, but has the know-how and has the experience, and it's not able to connect. Is it the car? Is it him? Like, I don't know, but I'm maybe like a little bummed that he's not performing it the way, especially with these little instances where he's crashing. And that just makes me bummed, because I'm like, I wanted him to be this incredible driver. Yeah. When he came into the grid, and it's just not looking like that anymore.
No. Well, okay. So we just have a few minutes left. So we want to look to Miami, because Miami's coming up this weekend, and so back-to-back weekend races, which is a big, I mean, consider going from Azerbaijan to the US. Like, that's
quite a flight.
It's a big, it's a lot to move, and of course they have their advanced teams and everything that go ahead of them. But we're looking at another race weekend and our second Miami Grand Prix. What are you guys' thoughts going into this weekend? Chad?
First off, I just want to say how bummed I am that I'm not going to be there. I was trying to find a way to go to either there or Las Vegas this year, and tickets were just insane.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, I got a call like a week ago from somebody selling tickets from Formula One, and because I signed up for pre stuff. Have you guys heard about them maybe not selling out yet down there?
I have not heard that.
They're not sold out, I don't think. But
so I think they're not. I think they're not selling out is like other racetracks like COTA in Las Vegas, and I think they just outpriced it. And so I think this individual called me. It was it was a legit call, but they were trying to see if I was still interested in a package, and I was like, I'm not spending $3 or $4 grand for tickets. Like, no, thank you. But it just, I've heard that they have it sold out, which I think
one of the reasons I heard about that was where I saw a comment where it's like, if I'm gonna ball out, I'm going to go to Vegas.
Right.
Like, if I'm going to spend this amount of money, I'm going to Vegas. I'm not going to Miami for a weekend. Like, I'd rather go to Vegas. And I understand that. So I wonder if Vegas is competing with Miami in that way. And if Formula One needs more of a...
Well, you figure anyone who on the West Coast would have gone out to Miami for the race
is now just going to Vegas.
Right. I do like that we have Vegas, COTA, and so we've got races in three parts, 3 time zones in the country. Yeah. But no, I hadn't heard that, Chad. That's interesting.
Yeah. But so that's sidebar. But so hey,
Yeah.
Formula One, if you're following us, I know you're a big follower of the pod here. If you would like to help the starting grid come, and we'll cover the race for you. We'll give a lot of coverage if you want to.
Absolutely.
Barry and Micah and
Come on.
myself, we're happy
Shameless
to
plug.
join.
I'll get on a flyer right now.
Yep.
Get ready for practice tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Formula One racing, please. No, so for my predictions, I'm gonna go. I'm on the hype train for Sergio. I mean, I'm a Red Bull fan to begin with. I'm definitely on bandwagon him. I want to be very clear. Early the season, when we talked Barry about and Micah about the Red Bull, Verstappen and Max, potential, and really seeing that as the only one. I didn't really give him a whole lot of real thought. Like, I like to see how he did, but I wasn't really thinking he was going to challenge Max, to be honest. It didn't start that way. So he's showing it now. And I'm definitely, getting behind him. I'm going to go, so Sergio, number one. I can't imagine unless something happens, Max isn't going to get number two. So I'm not going to go with something crazy. And I think it's going to be a toss up between Charles Leclerc and Fernando again. I think Ferrari has come up with something here. All is not lost in the prancing pony. So I think they're going to be really hard to beat for that third position. I don't think they have any chance in beating Max or Sergio unless something happens with the cars. But I think on their day they're probably a little bit better than Aston right now and how they're showing. Maybe not. I don't know. So I think there's going to be an interesting battle between them. But I'm going to go Leclerc as well. So I know that's not a big change from last week, but I think it's going to be much of the same unless something happens with one of those at the top.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's exactly what I was going to say as well. I think Perez, Verstappen, Leclerc. I think unlike Baku, this track doesn't have as many long straights. And so it gives the Ferraris are insane out of the corners. Their acceleration out of the corners, you just hands down better than Red Bull. But if you give the Red Bull a long enough straight, they have an afterburner feature, not even including DRS. So they're just So I think this is gonna. I think third place for Leclerc. I don't think we're gonna see the 20-second gap. But I'm with you. I think it's going to be a Perez, Verstappen, Leclerc race. Micah?
Just to be different. Because I'm thinking about this and I'm like, all right, it's Miami. Last year was boring. I'm sorry, but that was a boring race last year. It was a burner, especially because there was so much hype around it. It was not fun. This race, I'm going to say people know it a little bit better. Be a little bit different from you guys. I'm gonna go Perez win, which you guys already know. I'm gonna go Leclerc second, and I'm gonna go Fernando third.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I'm gonna say there's gonna be an incident.
Okay. All right.
So
cool. Well, I tell you what, it's gonna be a fun weekend of racing. We're excited to see practice kicking off, and then actually I have just a regular weekend of racing. But enjoy the race. We'll be back next week with our recap and a look ahead to the rest of the season. But thank you for joining us on the F1 Starting Grid. Share the link to YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Get your friends involved. I know someone out there that loves F1 and would love to join us in these conversations. Share your thoughts and comments as well. We'd love to hear from you. And so we'll catch you next time.